our viewers, can you show them your shirt real quick?
Oh yeah.
For people listening, his shirt says "Safety Third."
Third.
And something that's really cool that Ion and I have discussed briefly is, number one, the most important thing is kindness. Number two, innovation, tinkering, exploring, really maintaining a childlike curiosity. And then safety comes third. And I don't know, for whatever reason, that brings an ear-to-ear smile for me. And would you mind touching on how you kind of developed that little trifecta of perfection?
Yeah, so the thing that I really wanted to have when I started the lab was I wanted to solve big puzzles. So I've had the same 6 things on my board for the past 10 years, right? So when I opened the lab, 6 things that I wanted to solve before I died, and that's kind of been the driving force. And the common thread between all of them was they were all things that were for the betterment of humanity. I mean, it is kind of, just sort of, it sounds like I'm a contestant in a beauty pageant, but really that's what I like long walks in the moonlight, and I like to solve problems for humanity. And that's kind of what I was shooting for. And so I really believe that if you take a bunch of brilliant people and you want to make a change, you throw them in a room and you let everybody go and do their best. And, you don't really worry about the constraints. I mean, you're going to get the same results if you try the same thing that everybody else has always done. So we do a lot of different stuff around here. We've got a segment where we do a lot of biochemistry, then there's chemistry, then there's analytics. We have a whole section that's all nanoparticles. And then we've got a full machine fabrication shop where we make, like the guys right now are making a big hyperbaric chamber. And, before that we were making a biochar production unit.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which was cool. It makes this type of carbonaceous material that we use in concrete, so we could make a carbon negative concrete. So we're just trying to do things that really move the needle across the board. That was global warming, which has been on the board since I opened the lab. The biochem stuff, a lot of that is aging and cancer related, because longevity, aging was actually the first thing on the board. So that
I was going to ask what those 6 things are in order.
Aging, cancer, clean water, global warming, free energy, and superluminal travel, which is just faster than light travel.
Wow.
So, yeah, and the reason for the last one is I figure if we're going to actually become sort of an interstellar civilization, somebody's got to figure out the way to get us there, because strapping ourselves to bottle rockets, per Werner von Braun, it's not really an effective way to go. It's kind of the last century's technology. And actually, we've done a bunch of work on that. Literally we've hit, we haven't cracked the code on superluminal travel, but we've done some really cool stuff. We have an ion drive, not eponymously named for me, but but we've got some things, like drone tech and stuff like that using ionization drives. And there's some really cool stuff. We've just kind of hit the span. Like I was just drinking the handy Wizard water, which is this hyperoxygenated water that's really good for you, because it does one of 2 things. It either skews your pulse ox up to 99 or 100, or it drops your heart rate, whatever the load balancing function is that hits the best homeostasis for your body. That's what it does. So yeah, those are the things that I get to tinker with all day.
And also what's really cool though is like you're not just tinkering with it and then basing it just on like a feeling that has some sort of bias. You're looking at the real science. Like for those of you listening, he was just wearing a pulse ox on his finger while drinking the water, and I could see the real-time data as his cells in his body was absorbing that Wizard water.
Yeah, well, normally water just has 8 parts per million, or 8 to 9-ish parts per million oxygen. And so we've gotten it up as high as 228 ppm. And so, that's a huge spike. And so rather than have to, breathe more intensely, you just drink the water. Everyone's actually running at an oxygen deficit, which is why I did that, because our bodies evolved with 21% oxygen in the atmosphere. And now if you walk outside, it's roughly 19%. So everybody's running at a 10% deficit in terms of oxygen.
Why is that?
Just shift in the climate, shift in the environment. It's just changed. Actually, to compensate, people's respiration rate is faster than it used to be. So
would you say that's as a result of anxiety and constant stimulus and, fear of missing out?
I think I think actually it's probably more a result of environmental stresses. A lot of it, I think, has to do with not not so much toxic load like the compounds in the air, but really probably a lot of it has to do with EMFs. Where our bodies weren't really designed to be processing radio frequency waves and microwaves and all the stuff that's literally just permeating our entire system all the time. And, not to get off topic, but they're in your cells, your cells regulate their flow of calcium, right? It's called voltage gated calcium ion channels, right? And so your cells have this very balanced homeostasis. And if you disrupt the calcium ion potentiation in the flow, then the influx and the efflux shift, and that skews the acidity inside your cells. And if the acidity skews, that means the protonation is different, and it sets up this kind of cascade where the things in your body don't function as well as they normally would, which is actually why people, I know a lot of people noticed there was a correlation between like 5G and EMF and viral loading. Well, yeah, it's not some big nefarious plot. It's very simple. It has to do with voltage gated calcium channel flows. And if you shift those flows, the intracellular cytoplasm, right, it becomes more acidic, and more acidic means higher proton count. More protonation means a more receptive environment for viral loading. So you get more virus if you have more protons, and that's just basic science. So it's not some big nefarious evil thing, but we've got a built environment that's already kind of dinging us. So a lot of the stuff I do, like I worked on a project a couple of years ago for bees, and the colony collapse disorder. A lot of people said it had to do with neonicotinoids, and that's in insecticides, and there's a definite component of that. But I'd also say that a huge portion of it has to do with EMF stress, right? Because they're subject, as little bitty T9C insects, they're subject to the same things that we're subject to on a cellular level. And they've very clearly shown that lots of EMFs disrupt the navigation for insects, and specifically for bees. And it's kind of interesting, actually. I was meeting with the Nobel laureate who actually developed carbon-60, which is kind of the backbone of a lot of the stuff that I work on. And of all of the projects that I was working on, the one that really excited him was the thing for bees. And I just found it. He was a professor in his late 80s at Rice University, a really sweet guy. But that was the thing that seemed to really kind of tickle his fancy, was that I was trying to fix bees.
There's so much to unpack there. I mean, for those of you listening, you just heard a little glimpse in between the ears of Ian Mitchel. There's a lot of different knowledge in there. You clearly really understand systems and processes and can deliver them on a very efficient basis. But my first question for you, Ian, is can you repeat those 6 things that were on the board? Sure. And how did this conversation start? Like, where in your brain were you like, all right, I wanna start attacking aging first?
So what's become evident to me over the past decade was I just kind of wrote it down, literally stream of consciousness, wrote down, these are the things that I want to tackle. They're the things that I think are the big problems.
And what are those things?
So aging is the first one, then cancer.
Yep.
Because that's been an issue for quite a while. Couple thousand years is, if you ever read The King of All Maladies, which is a really good book on cancer, it traces the history back, and you can go back into, Egypt and find, records of people with cancer. So, I'm sure it's been there all along. And the older people live on average, the more it becomes something that you see kind of in society at large. And now it's literally like 1 out of every 2 people gets it. So it's not, but lifespans are longer. It's kind of like Alzheimer's, whatever incrementally goes down the road as we become older and older organisms. It's an engineering problem. Something's got to break, right? So cancer is something that I thought, this would be a good thing to fix. And then clean water, and then global warming, and then free energy, and then superluminal travel. So global warming, just because actually this sounds silly, but I think we can adapt to a lot of it. But the thing that I think might get us is human nature is kind of an interesting thing. And when people's resources start to go away, they get fussy. And so if you look at shifts in global sea level rise, and you displace 1.5 billion people, assuming that there's no precipitous decline in human population, if you decrease that many people's resources and suddenly displace them, they'll fight for resources. If people are starving, they will fight for it. I mean, historically, if you look at any civilization, anytime 1 out of every 3 people is either starving or unemployed or can't provide for their family, everything falls apart. There's either a revolution, civil unrest of some sort takes place, or just some mass calamity. But that's kind of historically, if you look at that, that's about the number. Like 1 in 3 things fall apart. And so if you take 1.5 billion people and you suddenly pull all of their resources, they're going to get huffy and they're going to try and take it from the other people. And I'd rather not see that happen. So I figured, well, if I can curb that, in any way, shape, or form, it's a giant problem. It's something I think we can solve technologically, but it'll even if I had the perfect answer for it tomorrow, or today, I mean, I think I actually could knock out the human contribution tomorrow, really. It still would take decades for it to really take effect. The reason I developed a carbon negative concrete was specifically for that. Carbon emissions from concrete, it's the 3rd largest emitter. If concrete were a country, it would be the 3rd largest producer of carbon dioxide in the world.
Oh man.
Yeah, so it'd be China, U.S., and then concrete. So it actually accounts for 8% of the global greenhouse gas burden. So,
for sure. What I'm hearing too is that there's so much complexity within problem solving within the world, because it's not just about the problem that you're solving. It's the implementation, the monetization, the political contribution, and there's a lot of different things to navigate. And so it definitely leads to some gentle challenge. So it's cool to zoom out and observe that you're like, all right, just like we do as in our day-to-day as humans, what's the minimal viable dose? What's the smallest thing that I can do that can have a trickle into our society as a whole that is low barrier to entry, that people can implement with very seamless integration, and then as a byproduct, receive the benefit. And one of those things that you've brought to the forefront for many of us, and it seems to be this unique biohacking thing that seems to be very popular within the health and fitness space right now, and that is this carbon-60 compound that you've briefly mentioned. Mm-hmm. What is it, and how did you get involved with exploring this unique serum?
So carbon-60 it's literally 60 carbon atoms clustered together in a truncated icosahedron, also lovingly known as a soccer ball. And so it's got a bunch of interesting properties, though. So when it was first discovered by these 3 guys in 1985, and they all got the Nobel Prize in 1996 for it. But when they discovered it, it was because they had seen it in interstellar space. And so they were trying to figure out what had an atomic mass of 720, and it turns out it was this cluster of 60 carbon atoms. So it's just an allotropic form of carbon. An allotrope is when you have the same elemental component, like in this case carbon, but its configuration is different. So you've got diamonds, graphite, carbon-60, fullerenes is an entire class. And they initially thought that it wouldn't have biological application, but eventually some people realized that you could bind it to lipids, and if you bound it to a fat, you could actually get it to move into a cell membrane. And kind of the seminal study on that was done in 2012, and everybody calls it the rat study, the Bati rat study, and it's Baati. And this fellow Fatih Musa was the lead on the thing, and they dosed all of these Worcester rats with it to see what effect would elicit, a kind of a detrimental outcome. The LD50, lethal dosing 50, is when you dose an animal and you try and figure out how much is going to kill the median portion of the population. And what they found was that the control group died, then the olive oil group by themselves, they used olive oil as the lipid base. Mm-hmm. Most of them died off, and then the C60 olive oil group lived 90% longer than the control group. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and my dad actually clued me into that study because I was trying to work on some longevity things, and he said, "Hey, have you seen this thing about carbon-60?" And I said, "No, I haven't." I read it, and I thought, that's got to be utter bullshit. Like a 90% extension in lifespan? No way. Like if
that's
that
huge.
It is huge. If that were a thing, like everybody would be beating the drum. So I thought, you know what, I'll just get all the stuff and start running some experiments. So I bought all the equipment that was necessary, bought a bunch of C60, and then actually started testing it out. And I got P53 knockout mice, which are, your P53 gene is your tumor suppressor gene. So if you buy these mice that have the P53 gene extracted when they're bred, so it's, you don't have a copy on either side, so it's a negative P53 homozygous knockout. Basically, they're the unfortunate mice that you use in, cancer work. So when you're doing an oncology study, you'll use these guys because they develop idiopathic tumors, which is just the medical way of saying it's spontaneous tumor formation. So they're the ones that you see with the little bulbous growths all over their bodies. So they have, because there are so many tens, probably at this point hundreds of thousands of them that have been used, they have the most accurately defined mortality curves. Like, within a very narrow band how long they're going to live, and it's a very short time if you use the homozygous, right? So you've got wild type, which is like the natural configuration; they live the longest. Then heterozygous, positive, negative knockouts, and then homozygous have the shortest. And so in this case, I wanted something that would have a really short lifespan, roughly 6 months. And so I started dosing them with the compounds. And what I found was, on average, they lived 93% longer than they were supposed to, and they didn't die of tumors, which was in and of itself kind of a boggling outcome. The first one, I did the necropsy myself, and I opened it up, and I was looking at it, and I thought, wow, it died of a femoral hemorrhage, right? Like there's no tumor. And then I thought, well, I'm not a vet pathologist. I don't do this all the time. I'm just, basically kind of like the shade tree mechanic in terms of doing, a necropsy on an animal. So I thought, oh, I'll send it off to a veterinary pathologist, and I'll have full histology workups done and look at tissue samples and blood samples and just get everything drilled down. And same thing, they didn't find any evidence that they were dying of tumors or cancers or anything like that. It was really kind of a bizarrely confounding result, because they are literally designed to die of those things. And so that was
just out of curiosity, what was their diet at that time? Was it consistent amongst, other experiments that you had done? Like, are the rats eating the same thing in all of those, or did that play a factor at all?
Literally peanut butter. That was it. Yeah, it was I wanted something that would keep them in a ketogenic state as best I could, because I figure it's been my experience over a couple of different experiments, specifically with mice and rats, where we've done orthotopic implantation of tumors, where you actually administer cancer cells into the mice or the rats, and then grow them to a tumor burden, and then administer different compounds to them to see what sort of effect you can have in terms of negating the cancer growth. If they're in a ketogenic diet, they do really well. If they have the standard American diet, it's unbelievable how fast cancer propagates in an environment that's very sugar and carbohydrate rich. Yeah. I mean, cancers are glycolytic in nature. Not all of them, but the bulk of them are, right? So they want sugar, and then sugar's what fuels their growth. So I tried with these guys, not intentionally, but I just tried to give them a ketogenic diet so I could have a really straightforward control and look at, everybody's eating exactly the same thing. So I kept them in ketosis most of the time.
That's so interesting. I mean, you guys heard it here, 93% longer lifespan, utilizing the carbon-60 compound with olive oil and on a ketogenic diet. Yeah. And then how did you then segue that or bridge that gap to, developing an optimal protocol and formula for human use?
So I did 2 large-scale clinical trials in dogs. You start out with mice or rodents, and you work from the murine side of things, where you're playing with mostly the mice, and then you kind of work your way up to the higher order stuff. And so I did two large trials with dogs to see what the response was with the dogs, and that was boggling, because I did cytokine levels, which are inflammatory markers in the blood, and then full CBC blood workups on all the animals. And it was more than compelling. Actually, the thing that was the strangest to me was I realized it took me a while, because I hadn't seen this before. When numbers were high, like say the triglycerides in an animal were out of range and they were high, it would pull them back to the norm. And then if they were low, it would pull them up to the norm. And it was almost adaptogenic in nature, which was really remarkable to me. So I started doing that and working with dogs, and and actually before I even worked with dogs, I guinea pigged myself. In fact, before I even worked with mice, I guinea pigged myself. And my rationale there was, all the articles I read said it had a pretty good safety profile. I mean, it's carbon. It's not like if you went to the hospital for some sort of poisoning, they'd pump you full of activated charcoal because it's a binding agent and it detoxifies your system. And this does the same thing. And interestingly, even in the lab mice, when you try to knock them out, you use this thing called CCl4, carbon tetrachloride. You actually have to use more than twice the amount that you would normally use to knock them out because it's hepatically and renally protected. So their liver and kidneys are just buffered so they can handle these. It's kind of like, taking activated charcoal and then drinking. You don't get alcohol poisoning. It negates the effect because it binds to the toxins and takes them out of your system, which is
so
why
if people are drinking and they want to either mitigate a hangover, they should take the activated charcoal tablets that I think Bulletproof makes maybe a few other brands now.
Yeah. I'd say either Bulletproof or Quicksilver. They both have really good ones.
Okay.
And
you're giving so many secrets away, man. I'm sure that's like the number one thing. People are like, what? I can drink and mitigate the hangover and the alcohol poisoning effects?
Yeah, but the other thing is you won't get buzzed either. So you'd have to drink a whole lot more. I think that I've actually had that as a complaint from people. There have been a couple of things that I've done where I thought, oh, this is fantastic, and people have the exact opposite effect. There have been a couple of women who were already in menopause and they went back to having a menstrual cycle. And, I thought like, oh, that's fantastic. Look at that. We've biologically rolled the clock back. Now you're having a menstrual cycle again. They were actually quite unthrilled with that.
Jeez.
So, I was thinking of it from a technological perspective, like, look at this cool thing we
did.
You
made them younger.
They were not having it. They were not fully thrilled with that. So, yeah.
That's funny, man. Trident Coffee is sponsoring this episode of the Invictus Mindset Podcast. My guys over at Trident taught me something really important this last year. That we are all a bundle of stories, both good and bad, and everything in between. At Trident, they're storytellers. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They help create connections through symbology and storytelling that engage their customers on an emotional level, and this distinguishes them from other coffee brands. You can find Trident in Imperial Beach and in Coronado. They offer over 14 plus nitro cold brews along with dairy-free options. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from their keto bakery. All these options will allow you to support your health and fitness journey with Trident Coffee. They're more than just a coffee company. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Once again, that's tridentcoffee.com. Use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Take your coffee experience to the next level. Two important factors for us over at Invictus Mindset are true care and attention to detail. My friends over at RX Smart Gear have been bringing innovative fitness tools to the market since 2009. From their award-winning Evo speed ropes to their amazing gymnastics grips to their line of inflatable fitness equipment, they're constantly looking to problem solve within the fitness industry. They're always allowing us to have our gear work for us rather than against us. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use discount code Invictus Mindset to shop their latest cutting edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's kind of like if somebody dropped a bunch of bicycle parts in front of you and you built the thing and instead of the front wheel, you put the sprocket there. That's kind of how a lot of, sports science stuff fares right now, and a lot of, nutraceuticals and things like that. It's sort of close, but it's not really like the right configuration. And I think one of the things that's good is we've actually got a really legit configuration of how the macromolecular stuff is set up, right? Like there's a buffer solution that delivers it, and different lipids are used to deliver different components. That's why the base lipid for neural is different than Olympic, right? Because it distributes differently in your body. One's metabolized in your GI system, one goes to your liver, fractionates and becomes beta hydroxybutyrate. Like they all use the body's kind of brilliance to parse out the different components where they need to go. And so if you build the bicycle the right way with those parts, you have a cool bike, right? If you build it the wrong way, you have this kind of broken contraption. It doesn't move right. And I know like when Sam reached out, he was kind of blown away because his numbers were just on day one after taking one dose were off the charts. But it's literally just straight up better biochemistry, right? So instead of kind of working from the outside in, I'm working from the inside out. I take the cells and I modulate intracellular output from the mitochondria up, right? So the mitochondria start pumping out these crazy numbers of ATP enhancement, mixing their own oxidative load and their inflammatory response, and literally everything functions better. So the cells function better, then the sarcomeres function better inside the muscles, so you get better contractile reactions. And all of that actually is a dose-dependent function. So you can do these and I've told all of you guys about this, because all of you guys are top performers. You actually have to limit your own performance because you can kind of elicit these muscle states that aren't natural, right? Like your muscles will fire fully. Normally your brain downregulates your sarcomeric firing to 25 to 30% of capacity. But if you dope yourself fully, like if you completely imbibe the cells with a lot of this, you can bypass that function, and the term is super precipitate the skeletal muscle actomyosin, just meaning that you can fire everything in one shot. So it's on you to say like, oh, I want to fire 50% of my muscle fibers, or I want to fire 60%. And if your normal deadlift is 500 pounds, well, legitimately you can do 1,000 pounds. Now, should you? Hell no. Because your tendons and your ligaments are not designed to do that. It's the equivalent of like having access to what you'd experience from fight or flight, right? It's like as if your body had just completely blasted itself with adrenaline. You have the same capacity, but you don't want to do that, right? So it puts it more under your own control, which is, I think, kind of one of the coolest things about it. So like the Olympic serum, it distributes throughout most of your skeletal muscle. And so that gives you a different capacity, and it also drops inflammatory response systemically. Neural goes to the brain, and then the other components. There's one for longevity that hasn't actually been released. I know you've taken that, and that the same thing. That is in a different lipid profile so that it upregulates stem cell production, and it's got a compound in it called urolithin A, which triggers mitophagy, which is just, you don't necessarily want to trigger autophagy. Autophagy is where your body kills the cells off. And that's a very expensive way to do things. It's kind of like saying, the car needs new spark plugs, throw away the car, right? I mean, that's preposterous in that analogy. But when you trigger large scale autophagy, that's really kind of what it is. It's better if you trigger mitophagy and you go in and go like, all right, cool, let's swap the plugs. So you swap out the mitochondria and then you use like PQQ or quinolone to upregulate the production of those things. And you just build a basic better body from the inside out. And so the other formulas are, like there's one that's called Elixir, which it's just an organic fraction of coconut oil that's bound to C60. And it's beautiful. It's like this gorgeous purple color, which I wish I had some handy. I'd show it to you because it looks fantastic. But those are the bases that I use to build the other products. And so it's kind of using the body's own innate intelligence to say, okay, what am I trying to do here? Like if I'm trying to upregulate stem cell production, I have to use these compounds in this configuration to get the body to do its thing, right? You give it all of the tools, and with all the tools at its disposal, it will do whatever you're trying to do. So we don't actually have a ton of products out. There's one for dogs. There's another one that'll be coming out soon for cats. A lot of people actually use it for equine things. So there's one fella who's fixed a disease called kissing spine in 2 of his horses, which is not supposed to be a treatable thing other than by surgery, but we reversed that and got rid of it.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. Actually, that's the thing is, I mean, me too. I mean, not only do I get to play with this stuff, but I'm playing with it because it's intriguing. Like I'm lucky that I'm on the front lines because I actually get to see all this stuff. And I've played with a bunch of other cool stuff. Like there's molecular hydrogen is really neat. The hyperoxygenation tech is really cool. Some of the quantum tech I'm playing with is really cool, but still the best thing I've seen so far is still this, the C60 stuff. I'm hoping that at some point in the very near future, maybe a couple of years, I'm able to drop the cost of it because it's still, even buying in huge quantities, it's still, roughly like $40,000 a kilo. So that's, it's really crazy pricey.
Yeah, it's expensive for sure.
It is. But
what is it about like combining it with a ketogenic diet? And, to define that, mostly protein and fat, where the body's eliciting ketones and very, very low carbohydrate, if any, integrated into the diet. Can you help define that a little bit for our audience?
Yeah. So one of when you look at the electron transport chain, there are different complexes in the electron transport chain. And if you're doing a lot of sugars, the flow path is different. If you're basing yourself in a ketogenic state, you're able to more evenly regulate the flow. And a lot of times what happens in your mitochondria where you're actually producing ATP and getting the energy to come out, you'll push through the complex really quickly. And that's not so good. What you actually want is the C60 wedges in the mitochondrial membrane and forms an oxidative buffer. And if you couple that with something that puts you in a ketogenic state, what you end up with is a cycle where you actually recapture some of the lost electrons. And so between the balance of electrons and protons, you actually are enhancing the system. So in ketosis, you end up with a much better process. We have a thing called keto new, which does that. It's a ketone ester combined with a serum that's really similar to the neural, and it does exactly that. It forcibly puts you in ketosis so that you don't lose things in the electron transport chain, you recycle them. So you build up this kind of buffer on the front of the mitochondria where normally it would be expended or it would oxidize and cause damage, like singlet oxygen production. And instead of losing it or having detriment from it, it actually recycles it until you process all of it through.
Interesting. Would you recommend that highly competitive athletes that, typically are utilizing high doses of carbohydrate for fuel and, some of the anaerobic components of their sport integrate more of a ketogenic diet when combined with these things? Or would you say this is more for health and longevity and decreased inflammatory biomarkers?
Both. I think ultimately we're going to see a shift towards really hardcore competitive athletes. You probably using things like this in combination with ketogenic diets. I mean, I can tell you from working on the cancer front, the difference is remarkable. And sometimes it's a lot easier to see the contrast in a physical system when things are marginalized. And the people that I've worked with that have cancers, they're very marginalized, and you can see a huge shift in their performance and their quality of life and their output and their energy levels far easier than you can in somebody who's healthy, right? Like in a person who's healthy, your body kind of buffers it. In a person who's super marginalized or is going through chemo or something like that, when you put them in ketosis and then you bump them up in terms of energy production with some of this stuff, it's literally a night and day difference. And I actually get texts. I had one today. I get text messages about that kind of stuff every day. In fact, I have a cookbook that kind of outlines the whole protocol. That's a keto cookbook that you can get on Amazon for that very thing. I'll send you a copy. It's great. It was written by.
I definitely want to check that out. This episode is brought to you by HVMN, Health via Modern Nutrition. They launched the world's first ketone drink in 2017. And then in 2022, launched the version 2 of their exogenous ketone product line called Ketone IQ. I found that incorporating ketones into my morning routine increased my daily focus and energy. The beauty of this product is that you can stack it. It doesn't even have to replace your morning routine. My morning routine looks like taking the dog on a walk, hitting my daily shot of Ketone IQ, hopping in the cold plunge, and then finishing it off with a nice Trident coffee while I soak up some morning sunlight. Try out some ketones for yourself by using the code Invictus for 20% off Ketone IQ. Ketones are a super efficient fuel for your brain that leaves you feeling energized and clear-headed. Give it a shot. I promise you won't regret it. Once again, use code Invictus for 20% off Ketone IQ. Move fast and break shit. This is one of the core values at LSKD and something that we fully resonate with here at the Invictus Mindset Podcast. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. Through my experiences with LSKD products and their team members, I have found a brand that I can call home that keeps me performing at my highest level through fitness and business. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer, so I can go from training at the gym directly to meetings, client consults, running errands, or preparing for podcasts. The LSKB vibe has finally reached San Diego, and we want you to experience it too. Go to us.lskd.co to start shopping today. We want to inspire you to chase the vibe. So last time we kind of gently discussed the concept of it depends. And so many people want the blanket statement, right? Like, what are the 3 things that I can do to, get the result or the desired outcome? Will you share with our audience a little bit some of your thoughts around the concept of it depends and why it does depend and how they can conceptually understand that?
I actually don't want to start this way, but it's honest. I get a decent amount of criticism because I've been so public facing for so many years, because I answer so many things like it depends, and I don't go straight into answers, and people think you're making tangents and you're going all over the place. Like, well, you just directly answer the question. And I've thought for a while, like, why do I actually approach it this way? And I think the best way to answer it is this: 2 things. Number one, I don't have one type of athlete I work with. I don't have one type of people I teach to. So when I'm teaching in class, and that's sort of carried over into podcasts and other media, I'm trying to be cognizant of the fact that I'm teaching to somebody who wants to be a physical therapist for older individuals, somebody who might want to be a personal trainer, someone who might want to be an NFL strength coach, someone who might want to go work in clinical cardiac rehab. And so my brain is always trying to answer a question with the assumption that people have a lot of different perspectives in which they're going to view this answer. And so I'm always trying to think about it like that, right? Would this answer be true if someone was trying to work with the general population? Would it be true if they're trying to work with high school track athletes? And so you want to provide, in my opinion, because I'm spending most of my time teaching people who are then going to go into their careers. So when they leave an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree, even, they're still just starting in their feet. And then in that job is when you learn how to specify.
Totally.
My job is to try to give you the concepts, and I think my job is more to try to expand your brain, so that you're not thinking about things only from the context of fat loss or only from the context of muscle growth or whatever the thing.
I love that you said that, just because I feel like so many people have this all or nothing thought process or approach. And what I really appreciate when I listen to you teach and listen to you speak is the understanding that humans are malleable. We're not all categorized into one box. And, it depends if you're training as a mixed martial art athlete versus a power lifter versus, trying to be the best mom out there. And so to customize the approaches to the individual, their needs, understand the different variables associated, I think honestly is really respectable. And despite the criticism that you endure, it's unapologetically being honest in your response rather than giving just the easy answer that most want to hear that can end up on the cover of Men's Health or something like that. So I appreciate your context there. Is there anything else that you'd love to add to that topic?
Well, just the second part of it is precision, right? The more we advance with our analytics, and our understanding of human body, it's now, I think, the second phase, which is initially, it's sort of like this has to be figured out. You got to figure out. You got to run experiments on yourself and figure out what works for you. And that was important message. Well, now like we're getting close to being able to figure out those things for you. And so to be able to the ability to say, all right, this is a group average. This is what science can tell you, for example. Science can tell you what's most likely to work for most people as a starting place. That's really all it tells you, right? But then you are your own individual you. And so giving an answer that is true to what's like most likely to work for most people is helpful for a lot of people. But we're at that stage now where it's like, well, why not just run the data on yourself and figure out what works? And so it's hard for me to give specific answers when I have so many situations in my head that I've actually experienced where I'm like, why not just go for high precision? Why not just get it figured out for you and know what works for you instead of just guessing?
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to give a blanket answer when I know that there's better ways to go about it.
Yeah, I love that. Easy is not the way, better is the way, or seeking to give a more encompassed and fuller answer that's specific to the scenario, which is super cool. How do you kind of categorize, the understanding of studies in this regard? Because we briefly mentioned a little bit of science here. And from my lenses, science is like, hey, this is what we know up until this point. And then it's meant to be challenged and deconstructed and explored a little bit. And it's interesting, right? Because it's like what we know right now is subject to change tomorrow and in the future. What advice would you give to people that are, reading different articles or pursuing understanding science, but, not taking into consideration that it is subject to change?
There's a lot to be said about this topic. I love science. I love epistemology. And I love the details of statistics, of interpretation and effect size and physiological relevance versus mechanism and things like that. So it is convoluted. I think as a quick answer, what I would say to folks is always keep in mind a touch of humility when interpreting research and definitiveness. So there are a number of topics I could explain to you, hypertrophy being the easy example, where we thought we had definitive answers that were just beyond reproach.
The growth in muscle size.
Sure. Yeah, like we know how to do it. The answer is closed here. Stop asking questions. You're being annoying. And then it turns out, oh shit, we were wrong.
Yeah.
Without just like heading down a road of fraudulent data and conflicts of interest. Like I'm not even talking about that. That is so far down. It's just the fact that there's limitations to technology. And there are limitations to scientific methods and approach and understanding, precision being one of them. We learn more about statistics for interpreting things like performance science. So without, again, being super detailed and unnecessary, the vast majority of the way that we analyze data scientifically comes from a model, a statistical model, that's not relevant to human performance, actually. And like this is just something that's happening in the last few years where we're just like, man, how we analyze to tell whether or not something worked or not, to be able to come back to you and say, yes, it worked, or yes, this was better than this. That entire statistical approach, I think it should just be thrown out, basically. And most people are starting to agree that. And so now it's just like we haven't even analyzed the data correctly.
Just some of the popular topics that I feel like come up within strength and conditioning, health and fitness. And one of the big ones that I see so often is people thinking that soreness is an indicator of a good workout. Will you touch on that a little bit?
Sure. It's not the worst indicator ever. It's just not a direct correlation. So you should not think more sore means more results.
Yeah.
Right. Now, it is fair to think if you're trying to grow your quad and you're doing a bunch of quad training and it's never gets sore, like it might be an indication you're not training hard enough or you're not actually selecting the right exercise that's targeting it appropriately. If it's like 0 out of 0.
Yeah, because you definitely need that stress for the adaptation for sure.
100%. It's just not like I'm pretty sore, 4 out of 10. Therefore, if I'm sore 7 out of 10, that means I'm going to grow more muscle. So those things are and the evidence I think is pretty clear at this point. It's not going to result in more growth. So you need to stress the system for sure, but you don't need to. What do we say? Stimulate, don't annihilate.
Oh, that's cool. I haven't heard that before. I like that one for sure. When you're looking at people trying to increase strength, there's definitely weight classes. There's the world of CrossFit where you don't necessarily want to be this monster because then you're going to struggle in some of the cardiovascular and gymnastics modalities. How to increase strength without drastically increasing body or muscle size.
Yeah, I mean, just manage calories is your easiest way, and then manage staying at a lower volume and a higher intensity. That's going to keep you out of those things, or the opposite, right? So go the other end, which is like now really past lifting and go into the high repetition, very high repetition, lower cardiovascular intensity things. Is this that middle ground? Middle ground combined with high protein and high carbohydrate, high calorie total is going to stimulate growth. So yeah, I mean, calories are the biggest way to manage it. Mm-hmm. For sure.
You're mentioning a little bit of nutrition, and I know you like to discuss this with who's the gentleman that you do a lot of the IG lives with? He's a nutrition expert.
Oh, probably Dan Garner.
Yeah. I've listened to you and him discuss a lot.
Dude. Dan is a wizard, especially when it comes to things like blood chemistry.
Okay.
And running whole blood and now blood. He'll do, and he's nuts. He takes blood, urine, stool, saliva, everything, and it creates extremely high precision micronutrient based programs. So not just like here are your macros, but very specific food choices for micronutrient need for your physiology and a whole bunch of other stuff. So he's a wizard. So I like to work with him whenever I can. Just to make sure like things are specific to your body, not just how much you weigh or your workouts or whatever. It's just like, no, we're taking a ton of blood and everything else out of your body and creating programs based on that.
Yeah, it's fun listening to you guys converse and hit the ping pong ball of knowledge back and forth. This episode is brought to you by Mush. My friends over at Mush created an incredibly cool product of ready-to-eat overnight oats. And for those of you that listen to the podcast often, you know simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And Mush has done just that, as their products have no more than 7 clean ingredients that are dairy-free, gluten-free, with no added sugar. Mush started right here at Invictus, as they had a vision to create convenient, healthy, and clean nutrition. And this landed them on Shark Tank, where the famous Mark Cuban invested in them. Now they're found in retailers all over the country, including Costco, Sprouts, Target, and Whole Foods. Check out my friends over at www.eatmush.com.
I've always been interested as an engineer thinking about things in terms of systems. What are the inputs? What are the outputs? And that's what drew me to computer science, engineering mindset. And as I was coming out of undergrad, I had the good fortune. I worked at YouTube, was my first job out of college, just like pure tech job, and learned a lot. I just got very sharp, really like heyday of YouTube, and started working on just personal projects. And in particular, started really getting interested in the human body as a platform. And the light bulb went off for me that, hey, your body is the most advanced piece of technology that you will ever own. Mm-hmm. And we are getting more mindful about the inputs and outputs to our body because of the proliferation of hardware, right? You see, you can wear an Oura Ring or a Whoop or an Apple Watch and track your footsteps and your heart rate and your heart rate variability and your sleep score. And you can even wear a continuous glucose monitor, and they're coming out with a continuous ketone monitor where you can measure in real time. It's like we've been driving the car with no dashboard for eons, and now all of a sudden the dashboard lights are starting to come on and you can see your blood glucose levels and your insulin sensitivity and all. It's like you had a car that didn't have a oil gauge on it before, or you didn't know how full your gas tank was or not. And as the lights are coming on, and they've been coming on and they're going to continue to come on, then it makes sense that people get more mindful about what they're putting into their body, because you can directly see, hey, what does this behavior change or this diet, what does it do to me? Like for us, like when you drink ketone IQ, you can see your blood ketone level goes up. I don't know what I don't want to dunk on anything. Like I don't know what an acai berry does, to put it bluntly. Like I don't know what a lot of what has been sold. I think consumers are getting smart because they have the access to the objective output measurements of their body, and they're able to see what is or is not working. And so this is a macro trend I saw. I was an engineer, computer science guy, really passionate about human performance, and saw this trend of the human body emerging as an interesting platform for innovation. And then started thinking through just first principles, what's interesting, and seeing, we can talk more about keto diet, ketones, how this all connects, but basically started like keto diet and bulletproof coffee was just like, has been trending hard, probably one of the biggest waves of the last decade. And my co-founder and I asked the like dumb/smart question of like, hey, everyone's doing intermittent fasting. I've done a week-long fast. Everyone's doing intermittent fasting. Everyone's trying out the keto diet, trying out bulletproof coffee because, hey, like it turns into ketones. Like everyone's doing these things to get their body to produce ketones, right? When you lower your carbs, when you run low on blood sugar, your body makes ketones. We're jumping through all these hoops to get our body to make ketones, and that's great, and we should still do that. But why can't you go to the store and just buy a ketone? Like you can go to the store and you can buy a shot of collagen, you can buy whey protein, you can buy apple cider vinegar, you can buy something for your gut microbiome, you can buy all these other nutritional primitives. And so like looking at the human body as a system and then looking at, hey, what is the biggest blank spaces that like could exist that don't? That's how we spotted ketones. Like metabolism is central. Ketones are a phenomenal form of fuel that are great when your body can make it. And why don't we figure out a way to put that into your system exogenously? And that's what kicked off the adventure.
I love that. There's a few things to unpack in there. One of them being the concept of systems. I really love that you talked about gentle reference to Ray Dalio and principles. You know, all those things are incredibly important, right? In trying to create some development. And when you're looking and kind of zooming out, looking at the market and realizing that, oh, wow, for a very long time, the world was talking about fat making you fat. Well, now we've come to realize that maybe that's not the case. Maybe there is something to this keto diet, which is typically higher protein, higher fat, a little bit less on the processed carbohydrate. At what point did you guys decide, like, hey, we want to lean in to trying to devour or attack this side of the conversation versus the other side, which was early on where it was, you know, low fat, high sugar, everything, chemical shitstorm, really, you know, in the early 90s, to be totally blatantly honest. And then it led to like these marketing terms like gluten-free this. And there's so much nuance out there that inevitably the consumer is, quite frankly, pretty confused. And they're just looking at the covers of magazines. They're seeing, you know, some jacked guy or some really fit woman saying, hey, this is how I've eaten. Let me try to emulate what they're doing. But there's so much more to the conversation than that. How did you guys narrow it down and see Business 101? There's a hole in the market. Clearly, you can't get ketones just to go straight to ketones. You have to go through this whole nuanced process to get there. At what point did you decide, like, this is the game we want to play?
Every business has a secret that the founders and early tribe around it knows and believes to be true that most of the rest of the world does not know about yet. That has to be true, right? If everyone else already knows the secret, there's no edge. It's already out there in the world. You can't go in and invent coffee right now. It already exists. 1 billion cups of coffee are drink every day. Sure, you know, maybe there's room for a new spin on a new type of coffee. Great. But in general, when you see massive innovation, when you see like Uber, Airbnb, Dropbox, when you see these massive phase changes in technology, it's because there's a secret that the founders know. Google search. I mean, we can go into CPG as well. Like things like, I mean, nutritional collagen wasn't really on the map a decade ago. CBD wasn't on, came on the last couple decades. Gatorade invented the idea. First in Thirst is the Gatorade book about how, you know, in the 1970s, everyone was drinking water. They started feeding the Florida Gators, the football team, hey, you know, the salt that you're losing in your sweat, maybe we should replace that in the drink that you're drinking. Thus was born Gatorade. So there's always this secret that the founders and the early tribe know that most of the rest of the world does not. And so you have to be willing to be iconoclastic. You have to be willing to go against the grain. You have to be
say iconoclastic? That is fantastic. That's a great word.
Yeah, I can tone it down too. Sorry,
I like that. Ride that wave, man.
Yeah, try not to make this a SAT test for people. I sometimes get. I read a lot, and sometimes I kind of classic. Yeah, just being really out there, one of one, and being okay with being at a dinner party and 9 out of the 10 other people there think what you're doing is insane because they have a normal job. Like, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a whatever, and you're there like, hey, no, look, ketones, like, hear me out, and you got to be okay with that. It's like Steve Jobs was batshit crazy when he launched a phone, the most popular phone in the world when iPhone came out. I think we all know is the BlackBerry. Why did everyone love the BlackBerry? They loved the keyboard. You could just type so quickly on it. The tactile buttons just worked. And then Steve Jobs was like, look, iPhone is crushing it. We're going to make a phone and it will not have a keyboard. And if you're not down with that wave, respectfully, get off the team. We are making a phase change where, because imagine a screen, imagine the same screen allows you to type. It can go in any language. It can become a video player on the full screen. It lets you play games. It lets you do anything. The screen, by not having a keyboard, can let you do anything. And yeah, it's super hard. It was super hard to pull off. It was super new. It got panned. The first couple of versions, people didn't love it. It wasn't unanimous. You have to have that vision. I was talking about Phil Knight earlier. When he's building his shoes, he was doing things that just were not being done on the market. And he had this secret. If anyone's read Shoe Dog, like, they kind of go into the science on it, where he was putting interesting types of foam in there, different wedges, different sizes. And these were just giving people a material advantage in the Olympics. And it was just a better shoe that no one knew about. But like Phil Knight and his co-founder was his track coach at Oregon, Bill Bowerman. Like, Bill Bowerman was the real, like, kind of like wonk guy behind it, like real technology guy behind it, was figuring out all the different types of foam components. Like, you have to have that secret that that most of the world doesn't know yet. And so I think coming from that understanding, it's like, it was totally fine for me to see that, yeah, a lot of the world is, low fat yogurt that has like 19 grams of sugar in it. And like that's supposed to make you healthy. And I have no issue calling bullshit on that. But like, I look at the science. I don't see that. I see that fat is really satiating, and that fat is such a broad term. There's so many different types of fat. There's so much difference between like an omega-3 versus canola oil. Like, what are we even talking about? That like, and you don't have to have too much of a tinfoil hat on to look at, hey, there's corn subsidies, and there's a reason why things that have like corn and corn syrup are like super freaking cheap, and why maybe that's being pushed at us, and why maybe the finger has been on the scale with studies that have come out to demonize things that are actually good for us. And we should not be eating cookies for breakfast in cereal format. We should not be eating cereal, period. And meanwhile, we've demonized eggs. Like, are you kidding? Like, we do, because there's cholesterol inside of an egg. It's like, yeah, like that cholesterol is not doing the bad things that people said it was doing. And let me tell you, Cheerios are not part of your heart healthy breakfast. I think all this, and maybe I'm just going off here. I think and probably
I think it's phenomenal, though. I mean, that's the thing that's so important for me around this concept of nutrition is we all need reminders of this, because subtly walking through the grocery store, or the other form of nutrition is what we see, what we listen to, who we converse with. You walk through a grocery store and there's so much marketing manipulation that inevitably it's like, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right thing over here? I'm kind of questioning myself now. And you start having this toggling within the ping pong ball in your brain. And I think you hit the nail on the head really around, you look at the onset of agriculture, in like the 70s and 80s. And that's kind of when we started to see the turn where sugar and corn syrup and mass food production and certain antibiotics and things given to the meat sources out there. And Mark Sisson, the author of The Primal Blueprint, I was a big fan of his back in the day, because when I was finishing basketball, I just felt really inflamed. And I was like, all right, well, the first thing they give us after practice is a Cliff Bar and a Gatorade. All right, a part of that is probably replenishing a little bit of glycogen, but the first ingredient on both was high fructose corn syrup. Oh, I'm already stressed because I'm trying to be a student and an athlete, trying to manage a personal life. There's so many different stresses associated with life. Simultaneously, you got 4 hours of a basketball practice, an hour of weights, an hour of study hall. There's a lot on the plate of a student athlete. And I turned towards Mark Sisson, and all of a sudden he starts pointing out the characteristics of the prototypical caveman before agriculture came around. And there's so much knowledge that came to that. And that's where I started my journey of like, all right, let's pursue the whole egg. Let's have meats and vegetables, some nuts and seeds, a little bit of fruit. Try to stay away from sugar and maybe a little bit of starch post-workout to try to get that insulin response to bring down cortisol, typically in the form of sweet potato. And obviously that can be customized on the goals of the individual. You know, at that time, for me, it was to try to decrease inflammation a little bit. But, you know, what are your thoughts on the historical reference in relation to nutrition and how that played a role a little bit into how you guys educate with HVMN?
Absolutely. There's a lot that we can learn from the past. That there's this idea of lindiness, which is that the longer something's been around, the more likely it will continue to be around.
And I think there's this seamless integration between preventative healthcare versus reactive healthcare. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think we've become more about the reactive healthcare side of things, and doctors and the physicians, and there's just the medical world kind of treating people like machines and robots instead of actual humans, and trying to understand some of those deeper levels of what's going on in that human, not just physiological, but maybe the mental side of things, and trying to tie in what's going on, lifestyle factors, and trying to see, hey, how are these things related, and treating the individual more than just, hey, come in, check the sheet, check the boxes, here's a prescription, done. And I think, like you said too, when we treat them like this, and maybe they have to pay a little bit of a premium, but guess what? It's going to actually resolve the issues. It's going to make them feel a lot better. So they're not going to have to keep going back to the doctors, and they're not going to have these kind of untreated issues that continue to linger, which over time, the amount of cost that builds up to is exponentially more than, hey, maybe come do 3-4 sessions with me. It's maybe going to cost a little bit more, but we're probably going to get to the root of the problem, get you feeling a lot better, and give you the tools in your toolbox and knowledge that you can go away, understand how to continue to stay healthy. And if you ever want to come back for periodic checkups and tune-ins, you can. And so, you know, people at first, it sometimes can be a little bit more money than they're willing to pay out, especially because what I do, it doesn't technically fall under physical therapy. So the insurance will not pay for it usually. So it's coming out of their pocket. So they have to see the value in it. That's why that first session for me is like, hey, I want to find out about this client. I want to assess them, but they need to see something before they walk out the door that makes them think this is going to work, because they're not going to come back unless they see that. So those last 15 minutes is big. You got to get some confidence in them. They got to see, hey, this is good. Even if it's not much, if they can be like, oh, wow, I felt that was different. Okay, I'm going to come back. I want to try that again. I feel like this could maybe be the solution. That's all it takes.
Yeah, I love that, Joel. And it also falls in alignment with, you know, if you give somebody a fish, they'll eat that night. But if you teach them how to fish, they'll be able to, you know, fend for themselves for the rest of their lives. And you're providing a ton of education. As we start to wrap things up today, man, I think there's some really common questions within, you know, a traditional session. You know, we briefly talked about the big 7, the squat, the hinge, the lunge for the lower body, a horizontal push and pull, and then a vertical push and pull. That kind of summarizes the brief 7. Maybe integrate some rotation or some foot stuff as well, because that is the anchor or the foundation. What does a traditional session look like for you? How many exercises do you implement? What is the time domain? And what do reps and sets traditionally look like? Do you pair things or individual set at a time? You know, I'm sure there's case depends here, but to give people some nuggets to kind of take away for program design.
Yeah. So typically a session is going to be, I would say, anywhere between 6 to 10 exercises. Now, some of those exercises, we may only spend 2 minutes on it, maybe like a little single leg kind of activation, foot warm up type deal. And maybe 1 or 2 of those could be like a little core stabilization or like a postural exercise if I see that something posturally is not going on correctly. But almost always I'm going to try to include those big 7. Now, within the big seven, if we say we have an athlete who we know needs more foot and ankle strength, for example, those 3 lower body patterns, like the squat, the hinge, the split squat, we're going to make those more foot and ankle emphasized. So we may do a single leg squat, a single leg hinge. We may do their split squat on a softer, unstable surface. So now we're actually kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. We're getting more foot and ankle stabilization. We're working on their motor control and their alignment while simultaneously still targeting the big movement patterns. Same thing with the upper body. We can take a chest press, do a single arm chest press with half their body off, and now their core is getting hammered with anti-rotation. They're also having to fire their glutes significantly, but they're still getting that intense horizontal chest pressing pattern in. So now we killed 3 birds with 1 stone. So there's ways to kind of consolidate the training so that you can integrate more components into those 6 or 7 exercises than just the 6 or 7 exercises. Now we may have included 14 or 15 different elements into those 6 or 7 exercises. So usually the reps will be, I usually like to say 3 to 6 reps. I know that for a lot of people listening, they're going to be like, wait, why is that so low? They're not power lifters. It's because the reps are done with the eccentric isometric protocol, which is much slower. So a typical rep is going to take around 3 times the duration than a traditional one. So a set of 3 to 6 is more like a set of, I would say 8 to 15 for most folks, because it lasts, 5 to 7 seconds per rep. So the time under tension is really all your muscles can tune into. And you will usually do 2 or 3 sets per exercise. Usually the first set, they're kind of grooving the neural patterns and those programs. And then the second set, we can see the strength start to build up because they're more efficient. And the third set, we may stimulate a little bit more muscle growth because we're actually hammering and fatiguing some of those motor units and muscle fibers a bit more. And then if they need warm-up sets leading up to that, especially if it's a strong athlete, we'll do that too.
Very cool, man. How do you kind of debunk I think I can do more, Coach Joel? Like, I want to do, a little bit more. I want to feel more of a pump. Like, what are your thoughts on that? If somebody, if that's the case, do they need to enhance the time under tension? Do they need to add more load? What are your thoughts there for, and I'm trying to think about traditional like CrossFit methodology where people are kind of rep chasing a little bit.
Yeah. My thing with that is I would say, even if you're a CrossFit athlete and you do have to rep chase because it's part of the, it's part of the competition, I would say take the last 10, 15 minutes of your session, and instead of doing more finishers and more kind of like high rep methods, I would say, hey, take a handful of exercises and do only 4 or 5 reps and make them as intense as possible by creating as much tension as possible. So instead of chasing reps or chasing numbers, chase tension.
That's really cool, man. And with these 6 to 10 exercises, what does the total time domain of a traditional session look like for you?
Typically about an hour. One of the things that I do is I do a lot of pairing and supersetting, and I'll have a bigger circuit. So for example, sometimes the circuit may be 2 or 3 exercises, sometimes it may be 3 or 5, but that allows several things. So we say, for example, we may do a squat pattern, maybe a core stabilization, maybe a row, and then maybe a chest press. And then we may cycle through that 3 times. And we may only give them 30 or 45 seconds of rest between, just to give them enough systemic recovery so they're not breathing too hard, so that they have enough energy and can create enough effort and intensity for the next set. But what that allows us to is they may have some systemic recovery and a little bit of systemic fatigue, but their local recovery, which is more important, especially from a technique and biomechanical standpoint, their local recovery is great because they don't come back to the same exercise for 5, 6, 7 minutes. So now they don't have too much fatigue in those muscles. So their ability to have high levels of sensory feedback and proprioception is still very high. Fatigue is kind of the enemy of motor programming and proprioception. So if there's too much fatigue, their ability to have that sense of feel goes out the window and their technique breaks down, and then it kind of defeats the whole purpose of what we're doing. So that way we can go, those circuits allow us to basically create a pretty fast-paced workout, get a high volume in, create a high level of work efficiency while minimizing local fatigue so they can still maximize body mechanics.
Are you over 35 and in need of a solid training program? Are you looking to improve your athleticism and keep up with the younger athletes in your CrossFit gym? Then look no further than our Invictus Masters program. This program places year-round emphasis on mobility and stability exercises with movements that we have seen directly benefit our Masters athletes. Our program is led by Nicole DeHart and offers a training program designed specifically for masters athletes who are looking to compete at a higher level in the sport of CrossFit. Some of our top masters athletes in the world train with us, including CrossFit Games champion Kevin Kester, Matt Beals, and Pat Sprague. You can learn more about their stories and the Invictus Masters program by checking out their episodes right here on the Invictus Mindset Podcast. If you'd like more information about the current training cycle or to join the Invictus Masters program, please email Nicole at invictusathlete.com. That's NICHOLE at invictusathlete.com.